everybody, Corn-Fed Lady here, and today I'm going to have to do a voiceover narration because it's a bit breezy.
So let's just start off with a few old photographs to give you a better idea of where our barrier came from. Now, as you can see, it started off just a bare spot of yard. My husband mowed it down nice and short, and we got busy digging holes and planting raspberries and blackberries, which were the first berries to go in our barrier. We put small cages over them to keep the rabbits from eating them. And over the next couple of months, we collected and put down cardboard to help keep that grass from growing back up into our berry gardens or our berry beds. And as you can see here, I'm also laying down a cinder block border to also help keep the grass out of the berry beds and to help keep the berry bushes in the berry beds. And after just 2 years, you can see our raspberries and blackberries were producing like crazy. I was actually collecting a couple of baskets of berries every morning last year. Now, of course, our blueberries, currants, cranberries, and other things have just been recently planted the last year or two, so they're not quite producing as much. And each fall, I trim all of the raspberries and blackberries down to about a foot tall. Just some small stems are left behind, really, for the next spring. Because these raspberries and blackberries are so prolific, they grow into these huge walls or hedges of bush. And if you let it continue like that, this whole area of yard would actually be overgrown or taken over. And now let's take a look at how our berry is doing today. This is Gabby Kitty, in case you didn't already know. She's our farm boss, and she's a pretty good helper too. Now in this first bed behind her, I have red currants and white currants. And as you can see, they're already starting to produce bundles of flowers, which will turn into cascades of berries in the next couple of months. And you may notice that there's a bare spot on the end of that bed here because one of these red currants didn't make it through the winter. So we've still got 2 white currants and 1 red currant in that bed. Now just behind that are the blueberries, and in here we have 2 different varieties of blueberries because you need more than one variety of blueberries in order to get them to pollinate one another and produce flowers like you see here, and eventually fruit over the next couple of months. So I've got 4 different blueberry bushes here of 2 different varieties, and I've alternated them. So every other bush is a different variety. That way the pollen can make it to their neighbor. Now just beyond this blueberry patch, I have a small asparagus patch that I seeded out last year. So I'm not able to cut from this yet this year. You're supposed to wait until the 3rd or even 4th year to start taking cuttings from your asparagus patch. So this year I'm just going to let it grow and fern out and establish the crown underground. And then maybe next year we can start to cut a little asparagus off of that. And on the back fence here, we have a couple of grapevines that my husband has some plans for trellising up these posts and across the lines. But he may even install an archway or some other trellis system for these to grow up. So we haven't yet trained them up anything, but they are coming back pretty good this spring. So they made it through the winter nicely. And hopefully they'll start producing grapes over the next couple of years. Now let's take a look at the middle row and our berry garden. In the middle row here, in this first area, we have blackberries, and these are all the same variety of blackberries. You do not need to mix varieties of blackberries for them to fruit. So you can see these ones also made it through the winter, and they're making a pretty good comeback for the spring already. Now we did chop all of these down pretty short last fall, and you can see there's 2 beds here with 4 blackberry bushes in each bed. And adjacent to that blackberry bed in the middle row is our cranberry bed. We have two cranberry plants in here, and again, they're the same variety. You don't need different varieties to cross. But they also have made it through the winter, it looks like, and they're starting to come back a little bit for the spring. Now, we just planted these cranberry bushes in here last year, so they're still pretty small, and we're still wondering if they're going to make it or not in our growing conditions here in central Illinois. Usually you will see these cranberries being grown in kind of a swampy bog or a lake area that they will flood to make the berries come off of the plants so that they can harvest them. But you can plant them in the dry ground also like this. Now on the other end here of these two rows are the raspberry bushes, and we have 4 of each in each bed. Of course, those will fill out to be just kind of a solid hedge of raspberries. And you can see how prolific they are. They pop up in the footpaths even though we mulch them pretty thickly. Gabby Kitty's really enjoying the sun today. Even though it's a bit breezy, she still likes to be outside. Now these raspberries we cut down pretty short last year in the fall, and they're already starting to bush out. So you want to make sure to stay ahead of these. Again, you'll see a lot of starts coming up in the footpath or in places they're not supposed to be. Even though we have that cinder block border, they're still migrating out into the footpaths where they're not supposed to be. So if you do have some of these raspberries, and if you have some starts like that, you can actually dig them up and transplant them somewhere else. And I would suggest, if you do have something as prolific as this, that maybe you should plant them along a fence line or a property line where you live, and that way it'd be easier to kind of mow along the edge of them and keep them better under control. And just past the raspberries in this last row is our strawberry bed. And you can see they're slowly kind of starting to come back a little bit. But it did get a little overgrown with grass in there through the fall and early this spring. Now we have weeded out the first half of the bed, but we still need to weed out that second half. And once we get all those weeds out of there, I'm going to put some of these pine needles on top as mulch, because those strawberry plants actually prefer the acidity in the pine needles. So we'll mulch this bed up once we get all the rest of that grass and weeds picked out of it. And again, on the end here, that's some more of those blackberries that we've got 2 rows of side by side. Well, that does it for our berry area. Next up, I want to take you back and show you our fruit tree orchard, which we've been working on planting over the last couple of years also. Oh, and you may have seen in a recent video that Mr. Frankie, our backyard rooster, had hurt his foot, and we believe he broke his middle toe because it's kind of crooked and swollen, and it was black the first day. And he'd been having trouble standing and getting around, but you can see now he's just fine. He's back out with his girls and enjoying the chicken life. So I just wanted to give you a little quick update on Mr. Frankie baby. He's doing okay. So now let's go back and take a look at that fruit tree orchard that we've got planted just behind the greenhouse there and all the way down to the end of the property. So we actually have 2 different rows of fruit trees, and this first fruit tree we planted 2 years ago, and it's an apple. Now we can't remember if it's the Red Delicious or the Golden Delicious. We planted one of each. One of them died, and this is the one that survived. So it's either a Red Delicious or a Golden Delicious. We'll find out when it produces fruit. And the next one in line here is a cherry tree that we planted last year. But this was a pretty fancy, expensive, grafted cherry tree that we invested in, and it's supposed to produce sweet cherries by the bundles. And let's see, the next one over here that we're coming up to, I believe, is the apricot tree. And we got these from a tree nursery online. We ordered them last year. They came in a box with no leaves on them. They were just kind of bare root. Some of them had a little dirt on the bottom. This one over here is just a flowering cherry. We have 2 flowering cherries in here that are just kind of mini shrubs. And they're not for human consumption. These would be for like the birds and bunnies and wild animals to snack on. And just after that is a first apple tree. Now this one is a red delicious apple tree, and we know that because we still have the tag from it. And the next one past that, I believe, is a peach tree that we got as part of that bundle. Now you see a couple of bricks sitting around some of these trees. Those are covering graves of some of the animals that we've lost over the last couple of years. That brick in particular is covering up a grave of one of our chickens named Tang from the side yard flock. And the next tree in the line here is a Fuji apple tree. And these are supposed to be really sweet red apples. So that one looks like it's doing just fine. Now most of these trees did flower about a month ago. So we're looking hopefully to get some fruit or to try a couple of pieces of fruit off of some of them. This again is another one of those birdberry bushes. And you can see it's covered in blossoms. So the birds should be pretty happy about that when it starts producing berries for them. Now we did have another apricot tree back here, but it didn't make it through the winter. So it's gone. And then this is another peach tree. So we've ordered 2 new peach trees plus the one we have in the front yard. So we should be seeing some pretty good peaches hopefully over the next few years. And the last tree in our fruit tree orchard is another cherry tree. Now this particular cherry tree is a sour variety. So the first cherry tree I showed you is a sweet and this one is a sour. So we can use them for different purposes. So again, we've got 2 rows of all these fruit trees tucked away back here in the back of our pasture on the back half. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll start to see some fruit come off of those trees. Well, that's all of our perennials that I have to share with you. Make sure if you're growing perennials that you put them somewhere that they can spend their entire lives, because perennials can live 20 years or more.
Know you've been a good friend, and that's in the thick and thin.